Alright, what's up guys? ZIIGAAT is back again, and today we got the Crescent in my hands, and this is basically a better version of the KIWIEAR metas that you can actually buy. Wait, I feel like I said that before. Starting with its overall sound, the Crescent is warm leading, full, but has this extra sparkle and crispiness to the treble that reminds me of the top pros. Now, when I A/B these to the top pros, both sounded very similar in the higher frequencies, as evident from the graph, with both of them having this like tingly and sparkly treble presentation to them. Basically, imagine the Crescent as a warmer version of the top pros, but with more mid bass now, less vocal clarity, less power in the vocals, but with that similar like sparkly treble playback, although just less resolving and not as detailed and technical as the top pros. However, the good thing is the Crescent is almost half the price of the top pros, so value wise, for those who are looking for more mid bass on the top pros but you still want that clarity and sparkleness to the treble, then the Crescent is a good side grade tonality wise, but a slight downgrade in performance, kind of like what the top pros are to the Monarch Mark IVs. And then versus the Odysseys, the Crescent first of all looks very similar. If you told me this was the Odysseys Mark II, I would have believed you 100%, but basically the Crescent is a more technical, slightly cleaner and airier, sparklier version of the Odysseys. They graph and sound very similar from the low end all the way until the treble region, where the Crescent has like a 15 to 20 dB treble boost over the Odysseys. And the main difference between these two would be that the amount of treble detail you get is just a lot more on the Crescent, and as well like the imaging, the attack on the nose is also going to be slightly sharper on the Crescent. Clarity and separation also goes to the Crescent, and it's slightly more resolving, posts out a little bit more detail, especially when it comes to the treble region where the cymbal crashes just sound noticeably more airy, like more nuanced in the decay, you know, making it seem more, I guess, like high fidelity compared to the Odysseys performance wise. Now when it comes to bass, the Crescent also has that bassy signature as the Odysseys. It's pretty impactful in the slam, it's good rumble, it's thumpy, it's well controlled, but it's just not as like full and impactful as the Odysseys, since it does have slightly less mid bass. It's a little bit tighter in the low end presentation versus the Odysseys, and also the extra treble does help balance out the low end more on the Crescent. Whereas the Odysseys are gonna feel like more heavy, it slams a little bit harder. The low end is gonna feel more forward in the mix because it just has less treble energy, since you know there's a treble dip, which automatically shifts your focus more onto the low end and makes everything like feel bassier than it is versus the Crescent. Now since the Crescent does have a lot more treble, this also means it won't scale as well as the Odysseys. It's not gonna be as like intimate and doesn't have the same, you know, take you on a journey kind of vibe as the Odysseys have. So for those who listen louder or like a more bassier presentation, the Odysseys would still be better, whereas if you listen at mid volume, then the Crescent would be the better all-rounder overall with more detail and better separation. However, I did run into some issues on the Crescent when it comes to more energetic tracks. It just feels a little bit too hot and energetic in the treble because of the boost, and you know, it just doesn't scale very well. So if you want a smoother playback, the Odysseys would still be less fatiguing overall, bassier, and quote-unquote more immersive. And speaking of scaling and being energetic, again, the Crescent is a mid-volume set around 65-70 dBs for most genres, and it doesn't scale too well, especially on more energetic tracks like K-pop, J-pop, because of the extra treble boost. Your ZIIGAAT LUNA, even some like metal stuff, you know, even some hard rock does get a bit fatiguing and just becomes too much because of the energy. For example, on Say It and Butterfly, I couldn't like get past mid-volume on those two songs, probably around like 50 to 60 dBs because of the extra treble boost and the nose BA, which tend to have like quote-unquote more bite to them, which makes the overall playback just a little bit too energetic on certain tracks. So when it comes to more energetic and fast-paced tracks like J-pop, K-pop, pop, EDM, unless you listen at lower volumes, I would probably take the Odysseys over these. The treble just gets a little bit too much at times, and I would recommend genre-wise listen to like slower stuff like slower pop, slower rock, indie, slower bands, you know, R&B, instrumentals. Those all sound very musical, quote-unquote musical. Even some modern rap and hip-hop can feel like overboosted, a little bit too sharp in the snares, the cymbals. It just gets a bit too much. Now tip-wise, I am using the stock clear tips that it comes with, which are basically the Software Ultra Clear. They work very well. It strikes this fine balance of being smooth and detailed, but you can also use the Senkai Regular, Senkai Wise, the Nobles if you feel like the treble is too much, which I can see it being a bit too much for some people, or even bassier tips like the Spin Fits, Final Ease, Velvets. All those could help just make the balance better. I just wouldn't recommend any that boost the upper mids or the treble, like the triclarians, the moondrop spring tips, or tips that just like gets peaky, like some of the like low end like stock silicon stuff that most IEMs comes with. As for some more comparisons versus the KIWIEAR Astral, the Crescent sounds very similar as evident from the graph, but it's just warmer now, less sub-bass focus, has a more gradual like bass glide into the lower mids, has a sharper treble playback, and slightly less technical in the layering compared to the Astrals. Basically, if you already have the Astrals, you don't need to get the Crescent because both follow a similar, meta, bass boost, all-rounder type of sound, vibrant, fun. It really just comes down to, do you like a sparklier playback with more thickness? If yes, go for the Crescent. If no, the Astrals will be the better pick for a smoother treble playback with better separation while still being engaging and dynamic like the Crescent. Value wise, I would say both are pretty good. You can get the Astrals for $250, you can get these for like $220, $230 on sale. So it's not a huge difference in price, just like the technical performance. Just go for the tuning. Depending on that, you can pick whichever one you like. Next, compared to my unit of the ZIIGAAT LUNA, because I know some units have like slightly different tuning, like a slightly scooped out lower mid section. So going off of my unit of the Luna, the Crescent is basically a sparklier and sharper version of the Luna. For example, if the Luna is a warm and airy set that scales very well, very smooth, then the Crescent is a mid-volume, warm but sparklier set that's not as smooth and slightly less technical. When it comes to rock, metal, bands, even hip-hop, I would definitely go for the Luna because it's just smoother, it's less fatiguing, it's more refined, you can crank them up more. And if you already have the Luna, you don't need to get the Crescent because, again, both are pretty close aside from the smooth versus more energetic treble playback. Then versus some vocal sets like the ARCANIS, the Volume S, Cadenza 4, P50, the Crescent isn't a vocal powerhouse or really specialized in the mid-range because it is slightly scooped when it comes to the upper mids, and because the focus is more onto the sparklier treble presentation as well. So if you're looking for a vocal all-rounder, then the P50s or even the Studio 4 would still be better. Both highlight the vocals better, they pop out more, it sounds more balanced and more like quote unquote more like in focus when it comes to the artist. And if you want like a thicker, male vocal artist centric set, go for the Volume S. Those are going to do it better. It has more body and the power and extension as well. And if you're looking for female vocals, then the Cadenza 4 has you covered there with the airy and sweet, slightly like bright treble playback that it has on that. Very enjoyable for that. And then lastly, of course, we can't forget about the ARCANIS. It's cleaner, it has a more immersive vocal experience. You can scale it up a bit more. The treble has that bite, the goosebumps to the nose. Very unique, very special. It's still my GOAT under $1,000. So for vocal wise, I would definitely take the ARCANIS over the Crescent. Then finally, compared to some bassier sets like the T Pros, Hype 4s, Martilos, obviously the Crescent is more of an all-rounder with a slight treble emphasis. It's not going to be as bassy, as like textured, impactful, rumbly, the authority, the slam isn't going to be as good as those. I would say those are a slight step above the Crescent in terms of the bass texture, bass impact, but as an all-rounder, these are pretty good. And if you want more bass, get the Hype 4s, get the Martilos if you want a bass head. So in conclusion, basically the Crescent is another meta-inspired IEM. If you already have something similar like the Astrals, the Luna, the Metas, even the ARCANIS, then you don't really need to get this. And personally, I would still take the ODYSSEYs and the Luna over these for scaling and immersion as well. However, that doesn't mean the Crescent isn't a good package because it is still well priced, especially when it goes on sale. ZIIGAAT also improved their cable, it's interchangeable now, and then the case it comes with is also better as well. And then you also get the high quality, Knowles BA as a cherry on top. So for those who are looking for a good all-rounder with some sparkly treble, or you haven't tried the meta tuning yet, then I do recommend giving the Crescent a shot, even though again, it's nothing groundbreaking, but I think most people will still enjoy these. But aside from that, I hope you found this review helpful. Just a reminder that the giveaway is still ongoing, so good luck to everyone that's participating. And I also got the Daybreak review on the way. July 31st, I believe, is when the embargo disappears, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Dom Q, Rark's Cat, Mystic Spoon, Attack, B. Urak, Disco Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, Giseng Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777 ZK, Wizard, Obi, Triple Well Extended, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapis Art, Choco Norris, Tamat, Xuan Bakale, FKSRG, Cousin Fat Fat, Julius, Dead Riddle, Belha, Armor, Nico, Parham, Nicholas, Brandon, Addy, Circle Gaming, Harder to Play, Wayu, Michael, Denir, Jacob, Vinicius, LL, Andy, Trackstar, Sammy, Fun Times, Shurjip, Peter, Someone Help Me, Oh Really, Syracuse, Little Meat, Ryan, Lit Han, Suri, Sweet Rain, and Torque. Thank you guys so much for the support.